Thank you once again for joining me as we consider a day text or verse groupings from the biblical writings and other related literature. We're currently working our way through the letter to the Hebrews, which is a likely first century letter that was written by Christians or a Christian whom many believe to be the Apostle Paul, one of the more well-known figures in the New Testament. But the writer is not named because of different conditions at that time. So we refer to it as the letter to the Hebrews. Day text or verse groupings. Just checking my sound quality there. We'll double check it here. Through the letter to the Hebrews. Okay. Looks like it's all working very well. So at times I change my mic setup. We do different shows. Typically on Saturdays we do what's called CW Jaw Talk. Or we may occasionally substitute that with what we call open session, where we pretty much just discuss questions that you have regarding current topics or issues of importance. CW Jaw Talk's more of a topical show. This Saturday's show is scheduled to be about ancient aliens and ancient alien theory. Many of you have probably seen some of the shows on TV, the History Channel. So we're going to show some clips from that show or from some of the shows and then talk about them. And then we also do what are called great messages, where we pre-record at times a brief broadcast that in which we include depictions or references to the information that we present, so that you can consider it on your own and have something to share with others that presents sort of a condensed message about certain biblical subjects. I have one I'm working on right now involving the divine name, the history and pronunciation of the divine name. And then I'm also going to redo the first one I did on 3 things. Even though it came out okay, I didn't have the mic really where I was talking. And so I might redo that one just to have a little bit better quality. But in any case, we meet every weekday morning, 5 a.m., unless otherwise scheduled. If I can't make it for some reason, I usually put up a notice that the day text discussion will be on the following day or another day. So take a look at the notifications, subscribe if you haven't already so you can receive all the notifications and new uploads. I have a new video I'm going to upload probably later this morning, apart from the last open session we did last weekend regarding the King of the North and how I believe that the earth has been left in the image of 2 beasts fighting over prey in the sky and in the ocean, the bear being that one beast being a bear and the other being an eagle. But I'm going to explain how all that fits together, as the largest picture on earth is the earth. And I believe Jah left it that way intentionally to show us the conditions the earth would be in our day. Either way, I'll upload that later. You can take a look at it. I'm going to put a thumbnail that will also show what I'm talking about, an image of an eagle catching a fish in its talons and an image of a bear catching a fish in its mouth while standing on the rocks and in a river or stream. Okay, so you can look forward to that later, but we're going to get to today's text. Again, we're working through the letter of Hebrews. This is a great text grouping today because it talks about several important historical facts, and it talks about faith and what it is. And this is very important because oftentimes people today will talk about faith as if it's something that doesn't involve good reasons, or that you don't have evidence for faith. Like it's something you just believe. And so it's different from something like science, where you can repetitively show something over time. That faith has nothing to do with, let me rephrase that. Faith has everything to do with evidence. The best evidence. If you don't have evidence, there's no way you could have faith. Even if you believe something is true, if you don't have evidence, that's just hope. Faith requires evidence. And so, yet people today, sometimes they'll say, well, I have faith, I trust in God, and I don't have to prove anything. That's not true. You need to be able to show evidence for why you believe in God. You don't have to prove it to everybody, but you do have to have good reasons, some evidence to show why you believe what you do. We're going to talk a little bit more about that after we read the text, but let's get right to it. Hebrews chapter 11, I'm going to read verses 1 through 6. I included the note to verse 1, and we may come back and consider it, but I'm not going to read the note. I may use it as part of our discussion, but I put it in there because it does help explain some of the information that we're going to consider in the context of the opening verse. Okay, so let me start there. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, and I'll just keep going through verse 6. Excuse me. Verse 1. So then, faith is being convinced about things expected to occur, evidence of things not seen. So you have to be convinced, and there has to be evidence. Now let's continue. Now, verse 2. For with faith, people of old were made ready to testify. Verse 3. With faith, we can see the ages have been prepared by God's spoken word. So what is visible has come from things which are not visible. Verse 4. With faith, Abel offered a more appropriate sacrifice to God in comparison to Cain, by means of which he was confirmed to be righteous, as God was bearing witness concerning his gifts. Even though because of this Abel died, he still speaks. Verse 5. With faith, Enoch was changed in order not to see death. And he was nowhere to be found because God changed him. Indeed, before the change, it had been confirmed Enoch had pleased God. Last verse, verse 6. So without faith, it's 5 a.m., keep that in mind. So without faith, it is impossible to please God, since the one coming near God must believe he exists, and he becomes the one who gives back to those who go out of their way to find him. Okay, so we have a definition of faith here. Verse 1, it is being convinced about things expected to occur. They haven't happened yet. So, as an example, you may have something that you planned with some of your relatives or friends. And everything that you've done to plan for the event, you've maybe you rented a room, you've invited all your guests, and you have paid for the catering. You've prepared all of these things, and everyone has sent RSVPs. They're coming. Weather's good, no problems. You have every reason to be convinced that's going to occur. True, I mean, things happen. We know that, right? We don't know for sure anything. You don't have to know anything. You only have to have good reasons, hopefully the best, to believe anything. Like we talked about with going outside and driving. Nobody knows if they're going to live when they get into a car and drive away. People die every day. Every day. We know that happens. So we know there's a good chance, well, maybe not a good chance in terms of the odds, but there is a chance we won't live. But we don't think that way. We never think, I don't know many people who do. When I get into a car to drive, I might die, I'm going to die, I might die. Now, neither one of them occurs to me, because I'm convinced in the conditions of the road and the rules and other people's wanting to live and follow them, even though it's possible I could be wrong and they could be wrong and we could both die. But we have enough reasons. You see, there's enough good reasons to convince us something's not going to happen, even though it could happen and happens every single day. That's faith. When you get in your car, even if you go outside to walk, right, anything can happen. But in a car, there's more chances of accident, I think. That's faith. You do not know what's going to happen, but you believe, you're convinced of what's going to happen, even though you don't know it. You have faith. It's not blind faith. It's not, well, I'm just going to throw caution to the wind and, I'll take my chances. No. You believe because of the rules of the road, the conditions of the road, the people that are riding on the road, the quality of the cars, and all the different things that have informed your mind to this point. It's okay to drive, even though you might die. Same thing, evidence of things not seen. That's the last part of verse 1. Evidence of things not seen. We could talk about all kinds of things that involve that. Gravity, right? You cannot see gravity, but we have evidence of gravity. Right? Just hold a rock in your hand up and let it go. You'll have evidence of gravity right there, but you can't see it. You see the effect of gravity. In the same way, we cannot see God as a spirit, but we see the effects of God, and He made everything. Look at it. We're here. We're alive. Life can only come from existing life. That's scientific. There's no exception, not even one. None. Zero. Yet the evolutionists are putting all their faith in zero. In zero, zero times, I guess, right? It's never happened. But they're putting their faith in something that's never happened. So they have no evidence. None. They're hoping. As I said recently, they're caught in an idea trap. They're not using any evidence. I know they point to fossils and they're lying though. There's no dates assigned to those bones, and you cannot date stone. So they're making up dates based on the surrounding sediments that they don't even date properly. There's so many sediments in the earth, and you wouldn't even be able to date. There was this one show about a lamp that somebody found, and they thought it was a Nazi lamp that was made from human skin. And the guy went all the way around the world to try to figure out if it was human skin or not. And all these different people were taking samples from the lampshade, and they all gave him different conclusions because they were getting different sediments, different biological material from the lamp. Well, what do you think the earth has in it? How much biological material from plants and trees and animals and things do you think fills the earth when it surrounds a dead carcass? These people are making things up to fit a timeline that fits their view that's based on no evidence. None. Even the experiments they do, like Miller-Urey, when I did a video about. Here you have two scientists who create conditions within a created laboratory and generate all these compounds, the temperature and the gases into a specifically designed apparatus that they monitored, and yet they excluded themselves from the conclusions they reached. So you're never going to get the information correctly from those kind of people, no matter how smart they think they are. As that one article I wrote, the EOP1 revision, one of their own colleagues says that sometimes they're just stupid. And we're all stupid at times. But when you're writing articles that try to tell people that you can create life without existing life, even though your life was involved in the creation of what you did, well, that's stupid. And you're misleading a lot of people, so you need to be called out on it. It's not like they just have their own view and they're not hurting anybody. They've been misleading people for over 50 years. That's a lot of damage from two men who couldn't even figure out that without them, they wouldn't have been able to do anything. And so that's the whole point we're making, that without God, there wouldn't be any of these things. And no one has shown that it would be possible in any other way. So this is evidence. It's scientific evidence. That's faith. And that's why people in verse 2, it says they were ready to testify because they were made ready by God. When it says that Abel, jump down to verse 4, Abel offered a more appropriate sacrifice to God in comparison to Cain. Okay, so we have Cain and Abel, the children of Adam and Eve, two children of Adam and Eve. And let's talk about this account for a moment. So they were obviously in a condition before the flood where the spirit beings were more involved with humanity, including other spirits like Satan and the sons of God who came down after the fall. And then you had Jah and his spirits. So here you have Abel wanting to show thanks to God for giving him all of these things. And you had Cain doing something similar, but not offering the same level or quality of sacrifice. Okay, let me just make a point here about this real briefly, because I like to make this point. This account of Cain and Abel is so important. And I'm going to veer off just a little from this idea of faith, but not so much. Oh, okay, let me tie it to faith this way. So how could Cain have reacted here? We all know that feeling of jealousy we get sometimes when people do something that we wish we would have done and they get the credit for it, and we think, oh man, I should have done that. Okay, right there, when you feel that way, that's what you should do. What you just said, I should have done that. Yes, that's what you should do. Not feel jealous and go kill your brother or go betray somebody because they did it before you did. The reason you're feeling jealous is because you didn't do what this other person did. So the way you solve that is by doing what they did. See, so Cain, he got jealous of Abel because Abel gave something of more value. Remember the sacrifices. This was before the Mosaic Law, but because humans were doing things on their own against God's will, they had to show that they were sorry by giving up something of theirs. And before Jesus, this involved sacrifices. All of these spirit beings, by the way, not just Jah, in some way, differing degrees, required a sacrifice of some kind from the humans that served them. And in Jah's case, it was to tolerate their ongoing disobedience. But Cain didn't value the things that Jah had given him as much as as Abel. So Abel gave him some of his actual living livestock, obviously more valuable than vegetables of the field. But once Cain saw that Jah liked the animal sacrifices better than the vegetables, all he had to do was give Jah an animal sacrifice. You see, the answer is right there. It's our emotions and our feelings and our sin, of course. Jealousy is not a good quality for humans in this way. Gets in our way. We can see the answer's right in front of him. He just saw it. His brother did the thing that made Jah happy. Well, if you just saw that Jah was happy because of something your brother did, go do that same thing. And then you'll make Jah happy about you. You see, if by getting jealous and hurting the one whom Jah was happy with, all you do is make Jah more unhappy with you. But if you then suppress your jealousy for not doing it maybe the best way at the start, and then you see, okay, that's what Jah likes, I'm going to go do this now. Jah's going to see that, and he's going to give you even more of a blessing because you overcame. Remember, he even told Cain, the sin is waiting for you. And what are you going to do? You know, he allowed him to choose. He knew what he was facing, but he wanted him, I'm sure, to choose the way that he just saw his brother behave. But he didn't. Okay, so that's a very important point I like to make, because people often forget that account is not just about one brother killing another brother. It's about one brother failing to recognize what he could have done to not only keep his brother, but to have Jah love him just as much. All right, and then so we've talked about how we can use faith to show that God created the ages. It says verse 3, faith we can use to see that God made the ages. And we've talked about that, right? Because life can only come from existing life. Therefore, life must be eternal. There's no evidence of any break in that chain. And scientifically, it happens every single day. So we see it observed probably more than any other thing. And we can tell that the life that exists eternally is intelligent because of everything that has been made. There's not disorder or just chaos everywhere in the creation in ways that don't seem like they are part of a systemic plan or an operation set in motion by other beings. It has all of the marks of creation, intention, and design, and management even, right? The conditions of the earth, the seasonal cycles, the heavenly bodies that also affect the conditions on the earth. These are all maintained and kept in motion, from the moon to the sun to the stars. So this is evidence that we can use to have faith in Jah. And we talked about Abel in verse 4. Let's jump down to verse 5 and Enoch. Enoch is someone we hear a lot about. He's referenced in the book of Genesis in a special way. And remember, this was in the pre-flood time when things were different. And in Jude, the letter of Jude in the New Testament quotes the book of Enoch. And we have fragments of the book of Enoch in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it was obviously a book of great importance. It's difficult to fully interpret. Some of our, other than the Dead Sea Scrolls, the versions that we have of the book of Enoch are not, they're not always the easiest to translate. And so in any case, Jude refers to him, Genesis tells his story, and the books of Enoch that we have are consistent with the events in the Bible. There's a whole book on the book of giants, which is exactly what we see described for us in Genesis chapter 6, before the flood. So Enoch was faithful to Jah in the way that Jah wanted him to be at that time, and so he took him with him. That's how special he was at that time. And of course, this was after everyone to that point had been failing Jah, at least in terms of what he had intended ultimately. But nevertheless, he continued forward with the plan that he gave for the seed that would come and restore all things. So last verse, verse 6, it's impossible to please God without faith. So that's why evidence is important. You don't have to be able to prove every single thing. I'm not saying that. But we should have some evidence. Real simple stuff. Life can only give life to life. So we know life is eternal. We don't have to be able to fully grasp it or understand it. We just know we're here now. And there's no way we could be here now unless there was always a life giving life to life. Because life cannot come from non-life. It never happens. So it's scientifically a fact, not even a question or a doubt at all, and yet all these scientists keep looking for the origin of life. The origin of life is life, eternal, intelligent life, whom we identify as Jah. So, we have plenty of evidence. Everything around us is evidence. The history of these people provides evidence that we can use to testify to others about the same things, and then also use to approach Jah to give him praise in Jesus' name. That's what we do. So I thank you all for joining me, and I'm just taking a look at the text. It looks like a question about some unrelated topic, but maybe we'll talk about it another time. Now, I do talk a little bit about rock paintings and cave paintings in the video on the front page of the channel, the earliest human writing from 3500 to 4000 BCE. I do talk about cave paintings there, which I don't believe are as old as people claim they are. What they do is they basically they try to date things according to their timeline, because they see us as evolving over this massive period of time, accidentally forming into asymmetrical creatures constantly. And because they see things that way, they require a lot of time for these accidental things to happen. And even then it wouldn't happen, but they need a lot of time either way. So they try to create a timeline that's consistent with their view of evolution. So they do things like they take cave paintings and try to associate them with Cro-Magnon man. And all of that is all garbage. Many times they fake fossils like Piltdown man, just an absolute farce. And then they often mistake prehistoric apes with prehistoric humans. You know, look at all the apes and monkeys and chimpanzees and a similar type of creatures today. Well, they were there before as well. Just like there were prehistoric horses, prehistoric camels, prehistoric elephants. There were prehistoric apes. And they're finding fossils of them all the time. Gigantic apes, in fact, and then also different types, just like we see today. So the Earth you see today had a variation very similar in the past, only different according to its time. But there's no evidence. There's no evidence of writing, actual verifiable writing, earlier than 4000 BCE. Cave paintings aren't writing, and I would argue that they're not as old as they claim to be. There's no evidence of astronomy earlier than 4000 BCE. Some claim again, dates can be assigned to things based on speculation. So some people date certain things in Egypt to like 10,000 years ago. But that's speculation. Again, you need corroborating evidence. So writing, metallurgy, no evidence of any metallurgy before 4000 BCE. Not even that early. So writing, metallurgy, and astronomy. Show me those before 4000 BCE, because I'm not aware of it. It doesn't exist. And if we've been evolving for thousands, even hundreds of thousands or millions of years, don't you think we would have a little bit more evidence of language, astronomy, and metallurgy than 6,000 years ago? Doesn't exist. So they're creating a timeline that's so far removed from the evidence, it doesn't make any sense. But again, They're using it to support evolution, which is not only nonsensical, it's contradicted by all the available evidence we have. In any case, that's good. It's good that we added that in because we're talking about faith. We're talking about reasons to believe in God, and they're all over the place. Look at my EOP article, Elihu Online Papers. If you go to the Elihu book site and you go to the Elihu Online Papers, the first one, I just recently revised it. You read that and you look at the apparatus that Miller and Urey created, and you look at the different things that Jah has created. I think the evidence is pretty overwhelmingly clear. I realize people get confused. We all do. But that's why you have evidence. You go back to the evidence, you review the evidence, and you convince yourself, and then you move forward with that evidence. So, in any case, okay, that's good. We got a little extra information in there. I hope you all had a great morning. I know I did, and it gets me ready for everything I'm likely going to face. So I hope you're ready too. And I will see you tomorrow for another day text as we work our way through Hebrews.